Good morning, everybody, and welcome to today's webinar on waste management, challenges in insuring and managing your risk. Today's webinar will be presented by special guests Chris Lloyd and Andrew Davis, both from Willis Towers Watson. So first of all, just some introductions. So I'm Sarah Jarvis and I'm a category buyer here at YPO in Corporate and Financial Services. Two of the frameworks that I manage is the insurance brokerage framework and the insurance placement DPS. So I'll just do a brief introduction on Chris and Andrew before we start the webinar. So Chris Lloyd is the Executive Director, Government Sector Practice. So Chris joined Willis in 1993 after 8 years with the major UK insurer, which involved underwriting and broker liaison roles. During his 27 years with Willis, he has carried out a range of client services and technical insurance delivery functions. Chris delivers a full range of insurance broking, due diligence and insurance support services to governmental and public entity clients. This encompasses all areas of insurance placement, risk transfer due diligence, loss and risk management advice. Chris has detailed knowledge of treatment of insurance and procurement scenarios to the design, placement and administration of insurance and risk transfer programs. He has worked on a large number of governmental and public sector projects, procurement providing services and infrastructure to central, devolved and local government. Chris currently provides insurance support and insurance due diligence to a large number of local authorities and waste authorities on residual waste treatment facilities projects and contracts. Andrew Davis is the Assistant Director. Andrew has been engaged as a risk management within large insurance brokers for over 25 years. He has also previously worked with governmental authorities, consumer goods, manufacturing and chemical plants, a safety, health, environment and asset protection manager. Andrew has gained extensive experience of safety, health, environmental, fire protection and loss prevention concerns within service sectors and manufacturing industries. So before we start the webinar, I'd just like to go over a few items so you know how to participate in today's event. You have all joined this webinar in listening mode only. Please use the Q&A facilities at the bottom of the screen to ask questions while we deliver this presentation. We will go back to these questions at the end, and for any questions not answered, we will respond after this session. So now over to you, Chris and Andrew.
Good morning. Can the next slide then? Good morning, everyone. Andy and I today are going to take you through the problems and issues that are associated with insurance within the waste sector. Unashamedly, I'm going to be doing the doom and gloom bit, which is what happens with the insurers at the moment, and Andy's going to hopefully provide us with how we might navigate some of the issues. I just really first off by saying the waste sector in the UK obviously represents a wide range of functions and insurable risks, so from collection through to transfer, recycling facilities and residual waste plants. But I think really across the whole sector, it now represents a challenge for insurers. So to a certain degree, what we're going to do today is sort of pick on one sector, which is the residual waste treatment sector, to demonstrate how insurers' thinking is currently sort of moving in relation to waste risks. But I think it would be true to say that the insurance market depends upon how the risk is presented to the insurance market. So if it's part of a wider requirements, so that, i.e. the local authorities, annualized insurance programs, that does take you more into the public sector type of general insurers across a large program. Whereas obviously things like residual waste treatment and other contracted out services will often be presented to the insurance market on an individual contract by contract basis. So I think it's just worth bearing in mind that that methodology does have an impact as to how insurers may react to individual risks, i.e. the greater you're able to bundle waste risk within a larger portfolio, the less impact the hardening insurance market is having. But nonetheless, I think it's worth just alluding to the fact that waste is now high on hard market insurers' list of areas that they don't like and are finding unattractive. So just really there's a lot of talk about the hard insurance market. and I think it's interesting to know what that actually means for something like the waste sector. So the insurance market's always been fairly cyclical, and that's dictated by a range of factors, underwriting results and investment returns. But at present, we are moving into a fairly rapidly deteriorating situation where it's really characterized by a number of things that insurers are seeking to achieve in the current market. So most importantly, they're now really looking at underwriting performance. So the insurers are looking to remediate underperforming lines of business, and pretty much for every insurer, they would consider waste to be in one of those areas which has underperformed over a number of years and has caused underwriting losses and claims. And so what they're now trying to do is drive what they determine as technical pricing, another word for insurers believing they get the right price for the risk, because what they're looking to do is deliver within their businesses underwriting results, and within those underwriting results is profit. So that's the underlying reason why the insurance market is hardening in the way it is, but that's also then led to other things that have exacerbated the current circumstances. So there's a great deal of market uncertainty, particularly relating to COVID-19. So the court case remains unresolved in terms of what will happen to it next, and most importantly, potentially the costs. I think then if you look at other things which don't often get mentioned in terms of how the insurance market's operating, is so the cost of reinsurance, which generally is resolved once a year on the 1st of January, is also going to have a major impact as we go forward, because reinsurers are unlikely to recover the cost of capital for the third successive year. So when the reinsurance market takes a dive, the retail insurance market also has to reflect those conditions. And I think the last thing that also is contributing, which is a sort of soft issue contributing to the hard market, is that there's been some significant change in leadership in the insurers, and that leadership change, they have all been mandated to drive a strategy around underwriting appetite and to address underperformance. So I think what we're seeing then is what the hard market is doing within the waste sector is, in particular, is reducing insurance market capacity for property damage and business interruption. So we have seen a number of the very larger facilities, particularly energy from waste and larger MBTs and MRFs, not obtaining 100% capacity on insurance, which is a circumstance which obviously for the local authority and any waste contractor that's operating those facilities is of major concern. One of the things it's meant is that the contracts that those large facilities are written through are now in breach, but it's becoming a more common trend that suppliers and local authorities are not able to obtain 100% of the risk. Premium volatility, I think, sort of goes hand in hand with what's happening in the insurance market. So the insurers are looking to underwrite back into profitability, but I think in relation to the waste market, it's the premium increases are there, but what's more happening, as I say, is the lack of appetite. If the appetite is provided and the capacity is given, it's given with reduced cover scope, but also things like vastly increased levels of self-retention. So again, even on small facilities, we're seeing higher imposed deductibles from insurers in relation to property damage and business interruption. So again, in the larger facilities, we're seeing deductibles being imposed in excess of $500,000, anywhere up to 10 million. So again, it's a bit of a perfect storm in relation to what can happen to a risk that has been insured for a period of time, has been operating for a period of time, and may be subject to contractual obligations. Those three things all operating together, so lack of capacity, increased premium volatility, but reduced cover scope and an increased excess, is putting tension between the contracting parties as to how the risk is going to be managed. One of the other things we've also seen is that underwriters are trying to work their way out of waste risk by imposing risk management and property loss control standards, and which Andy will talk about in more detail. But the impact from a purely sort of financial aspect is that we're seeing that a lot of those capital expenditures on waste facilities are are proving to be quite costly. And then lastly, really, the pandemic is currently creating or adding to that level of uncertainty. So as we come towards the end of 2020, we've already seen a distressed insurance market for waste risk that's probably goes back well into 2019, has become more exacerbated in 2020, but is likely to increase during 2021. So could I have the next slide? So there has to be a reason for why all this has happened. And fundamentally within waste risk, it's claims. So what we are seeing, and it's a very difficult thing to convince an underwriter that he should be offering his capacity when there are over 300 fires a year at waste facilities, and at a national level, with DEFRA, WISH and the Environment Agency and the fire services, it's been recognised that waste facilities of all different types, whether they be large or small, are suffering fires on a consistent and large basis. So the DEFRA, WISH and Environment Agency and Fire Service have tried to bring together processes and protocols to address the fires, but from an insurer perspective, they've really gone on unabated. And I'll talk about what happens within some of those fires and how they impact the insurers as we go down. We've also seen, again, in relation to waste treatment facilities, that they are very prone to engineering breakdown and engineering loss. So where there is an engineering covering breakdown, we're seeing there has been a high proportion of claims. I think the biggest issue and concern for insurers with waste risk is the nature of what happens in the event of a loss. So where you have, let's say, a waste treatment facility or a transfer station or recycling facility that suffers a physical damage, the impact upon the whole process of dealing with waste and managing waste results in a significant business interruption claim. So all the way down from if you have a fire within an energy from waste plant, a £2 million fire will turn into a £25 million total business interruption and property damage claim. So from an insurer's perspective, what they're seeing is that claims are happening unabated. So the volume and frequency of claims is extremely high, but the impact to the insurer is that the cost of those claims go very quickly into multi-million pounds. And really that's what's broken the sort of desire and appetite of many insurers to compete upon waste risks. In addition, as I say, I am the angel of doom, and this is the doom and gloom bit, but we're also seeing increasingly, as the pressures come onto the operation of waste facilities and the public are more aware of their rights, we have seen a number of noise and odour claims. So what's happened in these circumstances is often during the summer months where there has been significant odour from a particular waste facility, there have been a single claim made, often at a relatively low level, but then that's been followed up by multiple claims from other residents in the area. And there have now been a number of successful claims, both on noise and odour. Just to sort of, we've also seen vehicle-related losses in connection with collection and delivery, again, characterised by high frequency, often of events. And the contractual provisions that may exist in many waste contracts are fairly onerous between the parties, but also therefore require the insurer to step up to the plate. So, but for those whole combination of reasons, I think what we've seen is the majority of the UK composite insurers have decided to exit the waste market. So again, if you look at, for example, at the top end of the large energy from waste plants, the number of insurers who will be willing to offer their capacity in the market as we stand is less than 5, which is not a very good position for procurers and of insurance to be in. So can I have that next slide? Okay. So I think the issue is that if you don't address those negatives, because they're not going away, they're going to get worse. And actually, what we've also seen is that a number of issues surrounding insurance have led to disputes between contracting parties and adjudications over insurance matters, which is something that's generally quite rare. But within the waste sector, it really has become quite common for, let's say, where there's a waste contract with a waste provider, with an insurance requirement within it, for the waste provider and the local authority to be in dispute over the terms of that contract and how that contract is delivered. So when entering into, or when looking at any waste risk, there's really some basics and some positives that you need to take. Is that given that the insurer market, the insurer community is extremely small for waste risks, or generally small for waste risks, and they don't have great appetite, there needs to be positive engagement. So one of the key things is that you need to have a clear plan and time in which to develop and clearly understand what the risk is that you're seeking to put to market. So if you simply put a vanilla description of a waste facility into the insurance market, it will get treated with exactly that. The expectation now from insurers is that there should be understanding from the insured as to the fact that the market is extremely distressed and there needs to be a reason to insure the risk. So there needs to be positive engagement, but there has to be detailed and accurate insurance information to address the underwriting requirements. So within that regard, the underwriters that do operate in the sector have increasingly far less underwriting authority. So pretty much most waste risk will need to be referred to senior management and will need to have sign-off within the insurance company involved. So it therefore sort of fairly leads is that if the insurers and the underwriters' demands on information are not met, then the risk isn't going to go past post one. So it's absolutely imperative that a real detailed analysis of whatever the risk is undertaken and an accurate picture is presented to the underwriter. Wherever possible, obviously I think Andy's going to go talk about this a bit more, is what we're looking to do is proactively demonstrate the effective measures and risk management processes and protocols that may be in place. So there will be a level of expectation from insurers, but as with everything, I think if a risk can be presented in a positive light, it will always help in terms of how that risk is insured. There is also a case where I think increasingly, when you're looking at a waste risk, we're going to have to look more closely exactly what cover we are going to actually need, i.e. what the de minimis cover is being sought. Again, I think if a sort of one fits all and a scattergun approach is taken, and there are unrealistic demands on what the insurer is expected to cover, the easy thing in the insurance market for a waste risk at the moment is to say no. So we mustn't provide a circumstance in which we lead the underwriter to make the inevitable decision of declining the risk. So really a combination of the underwriting information, accentuating the positive, but having clarity on what is available in the insurance market in terms of cover, and what we are really seeking is important, because the real key is to thereafter is understanding what the available insurer community is to attract a lead underwriter. And again, for property damage and business interruption, we're seeing lead lines of down as low as 10%. So it leaves an awful lot of capacity to place. And on legal liability insurances, we're seeing limits being reduced back down to sort of 5 million and below. Lastly, there has to be an analysis of and real clarity on the approach to self-retention of risk. So if the expectation is that the insurance market is going to pick up a large waste risk with a smallish deductible, I think that's unrealistic at the moment. So it very much depends on the type of facility. But again, insurers' attitudes have changed. The focus used to be on the large EFW plants, but now there is an equally focus on all types of waste facilities and waste treatment. So anything from HWRCs, transfer stations, MRFs, in-vessel composting are all under the same scrutiny, whereas previously it was only energy from waste plants. So to a certain degree, if you had a portfolio of HWRCs, for example, it may well be that you actually take a look at what insurance is actually doing within that context, given that there will be a certain insurance market position as to what it will be willing to offer. So I think the overall message is that to enable you to be successful going forward in placing really any type of waste risk, but the larger waste risks, you really have to give yourself adequacy of time to plan your strategy, develop your risk purchasing philosophy, and present the risk in a really detailed format. Anything less than that, as I say, is likely to result in disappointment from the insurer's perspective. So really lastly, just wanted to sort of give an overview and just perhaps pick out one insurer. If I could have the next slide. So typically I just sort of put up the classes of insurance that we often see associated with waste risk, whether they be through the new construction phases or the operational risks. I think one of the interesting ones that is very prevalent in pretty much all of the large residual waste facilities, so energy from waste, large MRFs and so forth, is contractors' pollution liability insurance, that is however often absent from a local authority portfolio of insurance placement. So one of the routes of claims that I mentioned earlier was odour claims, so or noise and odour claims. So as a nuisance tort, noise can be handled under third-party public and products liability, so would be insurable under a local authority's corporate insurance arrangements with their public liability insurer. However, odour would generally be excluded. One of the major sources of liability claims in relation to waste facilities is and has been odour, and the number of successful claims, as the number of successful claims rises, then the more likely it is that plaintiffs will pursue odour claims going forward. So I think if you don't have a contractor's pollution liability protection in place, then you are risking a significant exposure to odour claims under waste facilities where you may not have the adequacy of insurance. So again, on all large residual waste projects, contractor's pollution liability insurance is a routine required insurance, but it may not be in other circumstances. But it's certainly worth looking at. The availability of contractor's pollution liability insurance is much greater than it's ever been. And actually that's probably the one area of insurance where adequacy of competition and insurance is available. So I would urge you, if you don't have any CPL cover, contractor's pollution liability cover in relation to your waste facilities, to have a look and see whether you have any odour exposures where the council or the local authority or waste authority may be exposed. As I say, so what we've tried to outline here is a pretty bleak picture, unfortunately, but it is the reality. And so as well as taking underwriting, or as well as taking due diligence in terms of how you approach seeking to place a risk into the insurance market, the other active thing you can do is look at your risk management and your property loss control as to how those risks are managed. And that's where Andy's going to sort of take you through some of the issues that are associated with that.
Okay, everyone, thanks Chris. Good morning, everyone. As I said, my name is Andrew Davis. I work as a risk engineer and risk consultant for Willis Towers Watson. When I was asked to put this together, I thought I'd give a bit of a background as to what are the competing demands on risk management and some of the key drivers that may well be affecting what we call the operational risks within a typical waste management sector. So I'll give you a bit of a background at the moment of where we're at in relation to risk within the risk management sector for waste. Health and Safety Executive. Currently, the Health and Safety Executive have done a review on the sector and found that, for instance, 2019, the waste and recycling sector accounted for less than 0.5% of the total workforce in the UK. However, if you look at the number of injuries in that sector, you'll find that they're second only to the agricultural industry. And their accident rate is 70 times greater across the average. So you've got a big focus by the HSE on that sector in relation to what you're doing about health and safety management. There's a forum called the WISH Forum, that's the Waste Industry Safety Health Forum, which is now seeking an integration of how we're managing all those stakeholders and ensuring that the sector's safety management systems, risk culture, and control management systems for health and safety are improved. So that's another driver in relation to how you're managing risk in your sector. Another stakeholder is the fire authorities. As Chris has already said, there's a number of high-profile fires. On average, we're getting about 10 to 15 major incidents a year within the waste sector, 350 general fires a year. The biggest problem we've got with the fire authorities is the chief fire officers see this as a major demand on their resources. What is good about it, although the waste is increasing, the amount of recycling and waste being taken through the sector is increasing, the number of fires are not decreasing, they're held steady, but the fires are becoming more challenging. We've got an issue associated with the fire authorities now looking at the resource requirements for those particular fires, and the fire authorities have another concern relating to how long it takes for these fires to be put out. Some of them can take several weeks to be fully extinguished. Another area, of course, the Environmental Agency. As you said, their main concern is pollution, and now they're seeing sort of fire as a major pollution incident, and that doesn't necessarily just talk about fire water runoff. They look at it from a risk management perspective and say, where's the source of the pollution? Well, how does it travel? What's the receptor? And how do you mitigate it? One of the things you're now seeing within the Environmental Agency is requests upon the sector as part of their licensing to look at fire prevention management. As part of your license and permitting requirements, you are required now to establish a fire prevention plan. And of course, on top of that, as Chris said, we've also got the insurance providers. They're becoming very selective, and they see now the property damage losses, if we go back to fire authorities, becoming catastrophic. They're what we call reaching what we call the maximum foreseeable loss. There are also concerns in relation to the effectiveness of the brigade response, and now they're asking for increasing fire protection measures to be put in place because, of course, fire brigades aren't dealing with the challenging fires. So that's the current scenario. Of course, next slide, please. What we then look at is all these competing demands. I would question where we are with an integrated risk management approach within the sector. So I would ask you to question whether or not you've got an integrated approach, because we come from the insurance sector, and in my experience, possibly the insurance sectors with all the other demands and drivers on risk management, health and safety, fire and environment, which are legal demands being placed in the sector, possibly the insurance requirements may well be not necessarily forgotten about, but put on the back burner. So where is risk control focused? Do you only focus on health, safety, environment requirements within your risk management portfolio? Do you have a risk management risk register? And does that risk register consider the insurance requirements? Do they actually look at, if we can't get insurance, because your insurance provider should be a stakeholder within your business, have we considered what they need? If we can't get proper insurance because of other issues with our sector, how are we going to address that? So, and also in your sector, who is driving asset protection insurance expectations? I'm a risk engineer, and sometimes where I find this sort of falls between 3 or 4 stools. It might fall with the engineering manager, it might fall within the health and safety manager sector or the environmental manager sector, but no one seems to be pulling together what I call an integrated approach. So the question I would ask is, do you have an integrated risk management approach which is joined up to look at the health, safety, environmental requirements and fire requirements in your sector to ensure that insurance is considered within that? Because that is something which insurers like to see. Are we part of the discussion that is had relating to risk management and requirements for improving risk within your sector? Can you have the next slide, please? So what I want to talk about now is what are the key things that you need to think about. From my experience within the industry, the waste management industry, there's a lot of change coming in. So one of the areas I think you need to think about is management of change. When I talk about management change, I mean, do you liaise with your broker or the insurer on fire protection management, or what that change is likely to do on an impact in relation to risk? Always ensure that if you've got any change going on, you keep records associated with anything relating to the construction materials, any changes in the separation of occupancies, fire pressure standards. What we tend to find when we go into your sector and look at a risk which has maybe been going on for several years, you might find a lot of the records associated with what that building was built from, what the fire protection standards were, and over a period of time changes have occurred. We can't get to the bottom of what the actual design strategy or what that particular building was, what its purpose was, and whether that purpose related to fire protection standards were actually being maintained properly. If you then go on to change something in your buildings or within your sector, look for a future-proof design. As I said, there's a lot of change coming in the sector. Fire insurers, property loss control insurers are looking for increasing improvements on how you protect your business. So if you've got something which is new, look for it's being future-proof, because you can guarantee a new insurer may come along and ask for a change in specifications to that existing design. So I know it's difficult to think I need to future-proof my design for my particular building or whatever we're doing within that building, but changing insurers, you may find they ask for a higher level of insurance and fire protection within our sector. So they may not accept the original design criteria and standard that was first put in. So make sure that you're able to improve and continually improve that particular design. Okay, next one. Next slide, thanks. So the other thing that the insurers tend to look at is, what is your risk culture? And it's a wonderful term, but what is your culture? And okay, what I look at when I look at risk culture is if we go onto a site or onto a particular business, it's what do they do, or how do they value risk management in that sector? What do we see them doing, and what do they not allow? And if we look at something like fire protection, how good is that particular fire protection actually managed? What are the things you do, the rituals you do? Have we got good fire system maintenance standards in place? If we get an insurance report, how well is that insurance report actually taken on board, and are the recommendations followed through? How good are your rituals related to the inspections and standards relating to maintenance of the systems? Now, some of this may well come under health and safety regime, some of this may come under the environmental regime in the business. But what you find is, I find particularly, is that the risk control may well be diminished due to the fact that you may be things are falling between various stools within your business. So defective maintenance, poor training, difference in practices and written procedures. So when we go on sites, what we find is that the things that you say you're going to do relating to like the procedures and systems may well not be adhered to in practice. Other things that insurers look for are things, I call them symbols, which are things which we actually see them happening. And the key area that they're concerned about, particularly in the waste management sector, are things like hot work control. How good is your hot work permit? Actually, does it do what it says on the tin, as we say? If you've got a hot work permit, is it properly applied by competent people with proper control measures in place? Another area is contractor control. I mean, I know the sector has a lot of contractors. How good are we at vetting contractors, ensuring that they comply with health and safety management, but not only health and safety management, but also comply with fire protection requirements within your business? And I said before, how good is your management of change? Do you maintain documentation, ensure the change is something which we can look for the future and is future-proofed? So next slide, please. So let's go into some of the areas we covered before. Now, I don't want to get too technical on this, because maybe people aren't particularly technically minded, but if we look at insurers' expectations, they're now moving away from what we call the fire brigade, putting their things out and turning up and putting water on things. They're very, very specific on expectations for design standards and certifications for standards. So understanding the design of your system is important. So if you've got any fire protection systems or any fire protection compartmentations within your buildings, you must ensure that they meet an expected standard. And there are various standards around. There's the A standard, which is ones which are insurer specific. There's the NFPA standard, which are even American standards. There's British standards. You have to specify what you're trying to achieve. So these design guides need to be available for us to be able to take to the market and say, these are the design standards that are applying to these particular areas. Fire suppression, again, as I said, the insurers are expecting you to ensure that the design standards for your sprinkler systems meet specific requirements. And increasingly, they're looking for an automated shutdown on conveyors, process equipment, alarm systems being monitored. They're increasingly asking for higher density discharges on systems. That's why it's important that any system you got in place is able to be future-proofed. They're increasingly looking for changes to an existing system to make it even better on the back that the fire brigade may not be able to put the fire out. And the main thing is, if you do put any changes in place, make sure that those changes are put in by competent people and that there are certifications. There are various certifications within the risk sector concerning like the loss prevention certification board, and designed and installed by competent people and to codes of practice. So next slide, please. So what are the key concerns we see? I do a lot of work in the waste management sector. We do visit sites. And as I said before, I went back to the sort of risk control, risk culture grid and risk control culture grid within your sector. And these are the key typical things we find. As I said, when we go on your site, we ask you, what was the design standard of this particular sprinkler system? What are the fire protection arrangements relating to the combustibility of the building? And unfortunately, you might not be able to find that information. If we can't find that information, it gives us a problem in showing an underwriter that you're actually got a building that can take that type of what we call fire loading. Ensuring that the water supply for your hydrants or the water supply to building is actually compatible and actually is producing, and are they producing the right amount of water, the amount of pressure? Are they tested? Other things on the site relating to like mobile equipment and engines, which are moving around your site. Do they have engine compartment extinguishing systems? Do we have look at any sort of power supplies which are particularly hydraulics? Have they got local suppression systems on them? What happens if there's any fire detection systems that are impaired? Do you have a procedure in place for ensuring that the impairment process is managed? So those are sort of like what I call design and fire control suppression systems. As I said before, operational management, what I call the human element. What we look for in those areas is how good is your contractor control. As I said before, hot work is a major concern. Hot work does give rise to a number of serious fires every year within the waste management sector. So I would ask you, if you've got a hot work permit, always make sure it's applied properly. At least a 2-hour fire watch following hot work. Ensure that the containment of any fire ignition sources within the area are written into the permit, and ensure there's combustible materials are separated away from the area where the work's been undertaken. Ensure that if there's any maintenance or inspection requirements on your systems, ensure the records are in good order, and always remember sometimes insurers ask for more than what is a statutory inspection requirement. They may well require that systems are tested more frequently. They may ask for requirements for fire protection which are more robust than those that are prescribed within statutory requirements, such as legal requirements. The other area, of course, is security. Arson is a major issue within the sector. So we look at how good is your security arrangement, how good if you've got any vacant areas on site, how good are those protected from any sort of thieves, and also in relation to how good is the systems relating to detection monitored, and how good is the response you're likely to get to those alarm systems. And of course, we go back to housekeeping standards and how good the site is. As I talk about symbols of the site, what does it look like? If you go on your site, does it look like it's tidy? Does it look like it's well managed? Does it give a good impression? We go around with underwriters, insurance engineers, and sometimes the first impressions or what they see gives a good report. So if you've got a good site, it does help, particularly with housekeeping, and also ensuring that any emissions and nuisance from that site are contained. Next slide, please. So let's go at the ongoing concerns. Now, if we look at future concerns in the sector, and Chris has already outlined, it's a sector that's a difficult one to insure. And we've got a lot of issues relating to ongoing waste fires. And why is there a difficult sector? Because what we're finding is a lot of contamination risks associated with it. Of course, we've got fuels, plastics, organics. In effect, it's quite a varied risk. And one of the problems we've got is sometimes we don't get ignition sources from your usual sources. There's a lot of spontaneous combustion going on, very much like a hay type approach, where you've got deep-seated fires, very difficult to contain. And that's another area, of course, is batteries. If you look at batteries, there's likely to be a sevenfold increase in the amount of batteries which are going to be looking at recycling in the next 5 years. So by 2025, they reckon there's going to be 35 billion batteries coming through, and those currently are causing significant issues at the moment as an ignition source in the sector. So if you are handling batteries, or there's an issue with batteries in your area, you need to make sure there is a process in place. There's a lot of guidance out there on battery management and fire risks in the sector through the Waste Industry Safety and Health Forum, which produces a lot of information relating to what you should do. Also, from your insurers and from your brokers, there's a lot of information on what you should try to do to contain those areas. And also in relation to the amount of plastics that are coming into the sector, maybe you're aware that there's an export reduction. So these plastics are no longer able to be recycled. So there's a lot more plastic coming through in the waste, a lot more increasing storage requirements for that waste, and unfortunately the facilities that are being made available are not suitable for that type of waste storage, so they're inferior. And also, if you look at energy from waste capability, they don't like, well, they are capable of burning plastic to produce energy. Unfortunately, the more plastic they put in, it does create problems with that particular sector in relation to the amount of heat produced. It's not good for the furnaces because it produces too much heat. So that's the next slide, please. And of course, ongoing and emergent concerns within the sector. Chris has already mentioned some of this. We've got environmental impacts, increasing concerns on the environmental impacts, long-term liabilities on this, of course. If you look at this, you've got waste problems are not going to go away. We've got concerns relating to the fact that greenhouse emissions from CO2, local health impacts, more nuisance and odours, and if we do get a fire in a waste area, it can take several weeks for that particular fire to be put out, which then causes local interference, and we then get complaints for nuisance and long-term health effects associated with that within the residents around that area. And also nearby operations and business concerns may well be affected by that. For instance, there was a fire recently, I don't know if you're aware of it, one which was in Bradford recently, where a tyre facility went up. It shut down practically the whole area, that neighbourhood. It was a huge fire, creating a lot of problems. Several tens of thousands of rubber tyres went up. The cleanup cost for that was right next to a main line station that caused the main line from York to Sheffield to be shut. So the impact of these fires is huge. And if you think the liabilities associated with that, they are increasing. So there's a major concern relating to the future and ongoing liabilities associated with the risk sector, which the underwriters for that sector are taking on board. So I think the point being, if we manage that risk well and integrate that risk well into our business risk register, consider what the insurer's demands are, and then look at it from the same perspective as a health, safety and environmental risk management requirement, we're probably making good progress there. But as Chris said, the sector is one which is a very difficult one to insure, and the more information you've got, the more integration you've got relating to how you manage that risk, the better the broker will be placed to find a market for it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Andrew and Chris. I'll just stop sharing these slides because I do know that we've had a question raised. So I will just go. Oh, it's just put, somebody's just put, it sounds like there are two challenges.
Two challenges.
Yeah, two challenges.
So what are the two challenges?
Availability of cover and cost of cover. How does waste compare to other sectors in terms of these challenges, e.g. accommodation, and what about biomass, etc.?
Okay, so one of the so when energy from waste facilities first became prevalent in the UK, they were lumped together in what was known as the power and engineering market in terms of how the insurance industry would look at it, because an energy from waste plant is very much exactly that. It's a power plant in many respects. I think the issues in terms of how the underwriters' attitudes have shifted was that there was a significant concern about the risks associated with energy from waste plants for the numerous reasons that were mentioned. But there was less focus placed upon other waste facilities. So say things like MRFs, MBTs, investable composting, all of the other facilities didn't really receive too much attention. That has radically altered, such that probably now, if you had a single site EFW, you would have a greater chance of insuring it than a mixed technology risk. So I think the answer to the question is the waste sector, in terms of how the market is manifesting itself, is at the extreme end. So we are, as I say, we're seeing deductibles imposed. We have seen deductibles imposed of up to £10 million on property damage and business interruption. In other sectors, in the renewable sector, better expression, there is less, there is still focus on the similar types of issues to the ones we've discussed, but it still remains more attractive than the straight waste sector. I think the answer, long-winded answer to the question is that energy from waste plants had always received insurers' attention, but all the other waste facilities are now receiving equal attention, and it's at the upper end of pricing, negative terms and deductibles.
Thank you, Chris. Right, so we've got another question now. Is there any specific to this market in Northern Ireland for insurance challenges?
So I think, again, it really comes back to the point I was making about what your how your insurance delivery mechanism works in relation to insurance. If your waste risk is subsumed within a wider local authority risk, that is more likely to be something that you'll seek to insure through the traditional public sector insurers, the likes of, actually say Zurich Municipal, not in Northern Ireland, but your more traditional public sector insurers. The residual waste treatment risks are the ones that get placed on a standalone basis, which are the ones that get more easily isolated. So in Northern Ireland, the majority of the waste risk will be, a lot of them will be subsumed within a local authority's existing insurance arrangements. So I think it would be easier for them to still maintain that type of cover than if they were standalone facilities. So if you get a standalone facility or a standalone requirement without that protection of the wider council insurances, it will become more difficult.
We haven't got any more questions, so if anybody does think of any questions after the webinar, if you get in contact with me at insurance@ypo.co.uk, I'll pass the questions over to Chris and Andrew, and then we will get back to you. So yeah, no other questions have come in, so I'd just like to say a big thank you for everybody attending today's webinar, and also a real big thank you to Chris and Andrew, because without them this webinar wouldn't have taken place. So I'd just like to say have a great day everybody, and we'll see you soon. Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Andrew.
Bye.